Welcome, dear listener, to a quiet journey through time. As you settle in for a peaceful rest, let your mind drift gently toward a world very different from our own, the rich, complicated, and often misunderstood chapter of history we call the Middle Ages. Before we begin, I'd love for you to take a brief moment to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's one of the small wonders of our modern world that we can be scattered across continents and time zones, yet come together here to explore the past in stillness and curiosity. And if you find comfort in these slow, boring stories woven from the threads of history and told with care, I invite you to subscribe. That way, whenever you need a gentle path into sleep, a new chapter will be waiting for you. But for now, let's leave the noise of the present behind. Close your eyes, get comfortable, and let me guide you into a time long gone but not forgotten. You wake up to the sound of hooves outside. It's not the clatter of a neighbor's ox returning from pasture. This is sharper, faster horse hooves, which means someone important. Your mother's already at the door, the cold rush of morning, wind curling around her skirts. She looks at you once, briefly, and then looks away. You don't understand yet, but you will by sunset. You are 12. That's old enough. In your world, England, 1327, your name matters less than your dowry. People speak in measures. A girl worth a yoke of oxen, a decent cook and good hips, obedient and quiet. That's the scale you're weighed against. Not by your worth as a person, but by what you bring to someone else's household. Your father has too many mouths to feed. 5 sons behind you, and another child swelling in your mother's belly. He tried to wait. Maybe someone from the manor would take you on as a servant. Maybe the wool merchant would need help. But winter is coming. The harvest was poor, and the man with the horse has silver. He's not cruel, just practical. A landless knight, maybe a merchant with good coin, maybe even a blacksmith from 2 villages over. Men who can pay are men who can claim. You don't know his name yet, but he knows yours. He's heard it spoken in terms of fertility, quietness, hands that can spin and weave, the width of your hips. He saw you once at the feast of Saint Swithin, and he remembers. When your father calls you into the hall, it's already done. You sit on the stool near the hearth, legs tucked under you, eyes cast down. That's what your mother told you to do. Don't look like you're too proud, she warned, tightening your best shift. And don't fidget. You'll ruin it for all of us. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. They speak over your head. There are terms. 2 cows, a parcel of rye in spring, a small pouch of silver mostly clipped, but still real. Your dowry is not gold, but it's enough. Enough to settle a debt. Enough to spare your youngest brother from starvation. Enough to make your father nod, even though his hand trembles slightly when he signs his mark to the marriage writ. You will be wed by next moon. You do not yet bleed monthly, but no one mentions that. A girl can bleed after marriage. If not, there are herbs, prayers, coaxing. You spend the next days preparing. The linen your mother gives you is coarse but clean. It took her 2 years to embroider the hem with small blue stitches. It's yours now. A single silver coin is sewn into the lining. Just in case, she whispers. You don't ask what that means. She won't tell you. There's no priest to oversee your consent. Canon law says you should say yes I do, but the church doesn't often bother with girls like you. Marriage is a contract, and contracts can be negotiated by men on your behalf. You will say the words when the time comes, or not. The ceremony isn't binding because of love. It's binding because it's spoken before witnesses. And even if it weren't once the marriage is consummated, there's no going back. Your sisters look at you strangely. One is 8 and afraid. The other is 15 and silent. She was promised once too, but her betrothed died in a plague. Your mother never forgave God for that. Better a hard life than a wasted one. You pack what little you have your shift. A second pair of woolen hose, a bone comb, the iron pin for your veil. You kiss your mother's cheek, and she presses your face hard into her shoulder. Her hands are rough, cracked from brine and frost. She smells like smoke and sour ale. She smells like home. The man returns with the priest a week later. You see him clearly for the first time. His beard is speckled with gray. His boots are fine. He smells like horses. He doesn't smile. He says your name softly and nods. You are smaller than he remembered, but healthy. Your arms are strong. The ceremony is short. The priest is old. His Latin half. Your hands are joined, and the ring iron, not Goldie's, slipped on your finger. You are now his. Not his child, not his apprentice, his wife. You are expected to serve, submit, and soon to bear. You climb onto his horse behind him, clutching the saddle tightly. The path is uneven, and the ride jolts you with every stone and rut. No one looks back. Your father walks into the field. Your mother stares into the fire. The house begins to shrink behind you. He lives 2 villages over, near a river. His cottage is cleaner than you expected. No children yet. A pig, a goat, and a hearth that burns with real oak. He gives you a corner to sleep in and tells you you'll get used to the sound of the river at night. You wash your feet in a basin and unroll your blanket. He doesn't touch you. Not yet. He says you'll have time. That's a kindness, you suppose, done in the morning. He tells you to start kneading bread while he checks the snares. You do as you're told. Time becomes a cycle. Kneading, sweeping, feeding the goat, boiling linen. He gives you 2 chickens to tend. You collect eggs in a basket and find satisfaction in their weight. You begin to learn the slope of his voice, his silences. He gives you a pair of shoes for your name day. You wonder if that's what affection looks like. But one day, when your body changes soreness in your belly, stains on the straw, dizziness at dawn, you realize it's beginning. Your mother warned you what to expect, but she didn't say how. Alone, it would feel. You kneel in the dirt to pray. Not for a child. Not yet. You pray to not break, to hold, to last. You think of your sisters, of the coin sewn into your hem, of the sound your mother made when you left. The days pass without names. Time is now marked by the repetition of tasks and the rhythm of survival. There is no school to attend, no books to mark the hours. Your world has narrowed to a cottage with thick timber walls and a thatched roof that leaks slightly when it rains. You keep a pot under the corner beam to catch the drips. It's a small thing, but you are proud of the solution. You rise before the sun and tend to the hearth. Firewood must be coaxed back to life with breath and dry bark. The goat must be milked. The hens must be fed before the foxes grow too brave. Each chore is small, but they add up, and each is a test of whether you are good. You want to be good, not because you love the man who took you, but because the alternative is worse. He hasn't hurt you. He is quiet, stern, and practical like your father, but less tired. He speaks in instructions, not conversation. Stir the pot clockwise. Don't use that bucket, it leaks. Patch the sleeve with gray thread. You nod, you obey, you learn. Sometimes, you forget how young you are. When your bleeding comes again the next month. He says nothing, but you notice he counts the days. The church says a girl becomes a woman when she can bear children. The village says it happens when her husband decides it does. Your body is no longer fully yours. You are now a vessel in waiting. You help butcher a chicken for the first time in October. Your hands tremble as you pluck feathers, but you don't cry. Blood, after all, is no stranger to your days. The sight of it no longer shocks you. One night, he returns with news. A neighbor's wife has died in childbirth. The child lived barely. The cottage is full of wailing. The priest says it was God's will. The midwife is not so sure. She blames a prolonged labor, cold weather, and bad fortune. You stir the stew a little more slowly that night. Your mother once told you that childbirth is like walking a narrow ridge. 1 foot wrong, and you fall either into death or into madness. You think of this often. You feel your belly at night, wondering what it would be like to grow full with a child. You are not ready, but readiness has nothing to do with it. That winter, you fall ill. A fever, sharp and sudden. He brings herbs from the hedgewoman, near the woods a woman. Some call a healer, others a witch. The brew is foul, bitter, nearly black. You drink it. You sweat through 3 nights, shivering under wool blankets. On the 4th morning, your breath steadies. He leaves a small dried lavender bundle by your bedside. It is the first gesture of softness. When spring comes, you are stronger. You've learned to bake bread without burning the bottom. You can patch his hose without puckering the seams. The goat favors you now, and even the chickens follow your steps like small feathered shadows. You go to market with him once a month. The journey takes 2 hours on foot. You carry the basket while he barters for salt and smoked fish. There are other girls. There's some your age, some younger, already round with child. One girl, no older than 10, clings to an older man's sleeve. Her eyes are wide. You wonder if she knows yet what has happened to her. You return with new pins for your veil and a small cone of honeycomb wrapped in waxed cloth. He lets you eat it slowly, over days. Each bite feels like a memory of something sweet and lost. You do not love him, but you have come to understand him. In the quiet hours, he sits and carves small shapes from wood animals, mostly. One night, he gives you a carved sheep with curved horns. You say thank you. He nods. Then on Midsummer Day, something shifts. You are gathering nettles near the stream, careful to wear your leather gloves. A merchant's son just passing through calls out to you. You don't answer. He laughs, makes a lewd comment, and rides on. But your husband sees it. That night, he doesn't speak. Not during supper, not after. You feel the silence as something heavy and raw. He's not angry at you, you're sure of that, but he is angry. At the boy. At the reminder that others see you. At the world that put him in a position to buy a wife. You sleep with one eye open. The next morning, he gives you a shawl to wear, he says, when you go out alone. It's not punishment, it's protection or ownership. Maybe both. The village priest gives a sermon on obedience. That's Sunday. He says a wife is a weaker vessel, as written in Peter's epistle. You sit in the back pew and think, if I am so weak, why do I carry so much? That summer, a woman is accused of speaking against her husband. She is paraded through the village with a bridle strapped over her head, an iron bit in her mouth too. Silence her. They call it justice. They call it peacekeeping. You call it terrifying. You learn not just how to survive, but how to stay invisible when needed. You speak softly. You lower your eyes. You do not interrupt. It is a skill set, and in this world, a necessary one. But not everything is grim. On feast days, there is music. You dance once with other wives, barefoot in the grass. Someone plays a pipe, another a drum. You laugh. Not because you are free, but because for one moment, no one is watching you with expectation. You catch his eye. For the first time, he smiles. You begin to think that this life, while not chosen, may be endurable. Then, one morning you feel sick. Not like last winter. This sickness is different. There's a heaviness in your limbs. Your chest tightens when you breathe. Your appetite vanishes. You know before you say it aloud. You are with child. You tell him by the hearth. He blinks, says nothing for a long time, then nods. Later, he goes out and returns with a new blanket and a pot of thistle tea. You do not know if he is happy, but he is preparing. Your body begins to change. You tire easily. Your belly swells faster than you thought it would. The midwife visits once a week. She smells like rosemary and carries stones in a pouch to read your womb. She smiles, says, strong girl, good hips. The days grow longer, and so does your fear. You have not seen your mother in over a year. You wonder if she knew this moment would come so quickly. If this is what she meant when she said just in case. You sleep curled around the carved sheep, hand resting on your belly, wondering, will this child have a choice? Or will the world already be waiting to take her to... The child comes in late February. The frost hasn't broken yet. The trees are black sticks against a sky that never quite turns blue, and the earth outside is brittle with cold. You are 15 now, though no one counts the years except for saints and taxes. The midwife said the baby would come when the snows were thickest. She was right. You wake in the early morning with a dull pain behind your hips. It grows, it tightens. The house seems too small to hold it. You bend over the edge of the hearth, pressing your forehead to the cool stone. Your husband lights the fire, says nothing, and leaves to fetch the midwife. He doesn't look you in the eye, but you feel something tender in the way he covers you with a second shawl before he goes. You are glad he isn't staying. You don't want to be watched as you break. The first hours pass in rhythm. Kneel, sway, breathe, moan. You remember your mother's warning. Don't fight it. Let the pain carry you. Don't try to hold it in. The midwife returns with 2 other women neighbors. They bring rags and boiling water and a carved wooden spoon. One woman holds your hand, another rubs your back. The midwife kneels between your legs, calm, focused, humming under her breath. You think of saints and bleeding martyrs. You think of fire. 12 hours, then 15, then 20. The baby is slow to turn. The midwife frowns but says nothing. One of the women whispers prayers in Latin. You scream once, just once, and are immediately told to save your voice. When the baby finally comes, your legs are numb from the cold, your mind emptied by pain. There is a brief silence, then a cry, thin but real. It's a girl, the midwife says, a strong one. They place her in your arms. Her skin is blotchy and red, her face pinched like an old woman's. She is the smallest thing you've ever held, and somehow the heaviest. You name her Agnes, after your grandmother. The first days blur. You feed her, even when it hurts. She roots at your breast with surprising strength. She wakes often and cries loudly, her tiny fists curling against your skin. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. You leak milk and blood. You hardly sleep. But when she curls into your chest and sighs, you cry. Not from pain, but from something deeper, something closer to awe. You made this. You held her inside you, and now she is here. Your husband doesn't speak much, but he builds a cradle with his own hands. It's crude, but it rocks smoothly. He carves small animals into the headboard, a bird, a sheep, a flower. You touch the grooves with your fingers and feel a strange kind of comfort. He never says he's proud of you, but when he takes Agnes in his arms awkwardly, carefully you see something in his face you hadn't seen before. Not happiness, exactly, but perhaps peace. The village sends gifts, a length of coarse linen, a string of dried apples, a pouch of salt. The priest comes to bless the baby and reminds you to give thanks. You nod. You are too tired to argue with God. Weeks pass. You heal, slowly. You walk outside with Agnes wrapped tightly to your chest. The snow is beginning to melt. The earth smells like thawing roots and ash. You are surprised by how bright the sun seems. You think of your sisters. You wonder if they will marry soon. You wonder if they will survive it. By mid-spring, you are back to work. The days begin earlier, the nights shorter. Agnes is growing fast. Her hair is dark like yours, her eyes sharp and steady. She watches everything. She quiets when you sing, even off-key. One morning your husband returns from market with news. Another woman in the village has died in childbirth. She was 16. Her baby was too large. The midwife is being questioned by the reeve. Whispers begin to swirl, accusations of negligence, or worse. You hold Agnes tighter. You think of the day she came, and how easily your story could have ended differently. You begin to understand why your mother never told you everything. She wanted you to survive at first. As Agnes grows, so does your knowledge. You learn herbs from the hedgewoman, raspberry leaf for womb pain, fennel for milk flow, valerian for sleep. You begin to help other women in labor at first, just holding hands, later boiling water, then assisting with the birth itself. The midwife says you have strong hands and a steady head. You don't tell her how terrified you are each time. You see too many things for your years. A baby born without breath, a mother who bleeds out in her bed, a girl barely older than Agnes, pregnant by her own uncle. You carry their names like stones in your apron pocket. Heavy, silent, real. You begin to speak more in the village. You are no longer the girl sold young. Now you are Agnes's mother. Your identity has shifted. You are useful, and so you are tolerated. Sometimes even respected. Your husband ages. He walks with more stiffness. He complains of the cold in his bones. You begin to do more of the lifting, the fetching, the carrying. He still repairs boots for neighbors. He still builds small tools and mends fence posts. But the days tire him quickly now. One evening, he coughs blood into a cloth. You pretend not to see. That winter is hard. Agnes is 4. She asks why the sun sleeps so long. You smile and make up stories. She doesn't need to know yet how long the nights can be. In the spring, your husband dies. It is sudden. One day he wakes with a fever. The next he cannot breathe. You send for the priest. He comes too late. You bury your husband behind the chapel with a wooden cross. There is no stone, only the carved sheep he once gave you, which you press into the dirt beside him. You are now a widow at 17. According to law, you inherit nothing. The cottage reverts to your husband's family, distant cousins who haven't spoken to you in years. You have 1 month to leave. You pack what you can: a pot, a wooden spoon, the cradle, Agnes. You take the carved sheep and the iron ring. You leave the rest. You move into a cottage near the stream, abandoned for years. The roof leaks, the hearth is cracked, but it is yours, for now. You thatch it with straw and mud. You trade bread and childbirth help for firewood and eggs. You survive. Agnes begins to speak more clearly. She asks questions. She hums as she plays in the dirt. One day, she holds up a worm and says, "He's my friend." You laugh deep, real laughter. You tell her stories at night, not of kings or saints, but of women who worked and bled and kept going anyway, of girls who learned to grind grain, knead dough, and remember the names of herbs. You do not tell her how you came to this life, not yet, but one day you will, because she will need to understand the world is not gentle, that it is not fair, but also that she is made of women who endured it anyway. You lie beside her at night, the carved sheep between you, and wonder, will she be the first in your line to choose her own life for just another girl whose price is decided by someone else? You don't remember the day they decided, only the day they told you. You were 7 years old, chasing a ball of rags around the courtyard when your father called you in. His voice was stern, not angry. You knew that tone. It meant business. The kind of talk you didn't interrupt with questions. Your mother sat at the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wouldn't look at you. That was the worst part. Your father said the abbey was taking new novices, that it was an honor, that your family's name would be remembered, that you would be safe. You didn't understand what you were supposed to be safe from. Your older brother was already apprenticed to a merchant. Your baby sister still sucked her thumb. You were the one in between, not strong enough to work the fields, not young enough to be fussed over, and not wealthy enough to have a dowry. But a daughter could still serve God. That's what your father said that night. You lay awake, staring at the rafters. You tried to imagine what it meant to be a nun. You'd seen them in the village, black robes, white veils, moving in quiet pairs. They always looked so clean, so quiet. One had once pressed a cool hand to your forehead when you had a fever. She smelled like lavender and wood smoke. You told yourself it wouldn't be so bad. You were wrong. They brought you to the priory at age 8. It sat on the edge of the forest, with stone walls that looked like they'd grown from the earth itself. The gate closed behind you with a sound that felt like forever. Your father gave you a kiss on the forehead. Your mother handed you a bundle, your shift, your comb, a worn copy of the Psalter. Then they turned and left. You ran to the gate. You called out. Your voice echoed, but they didn't look back. You were led inside by a woman with a face like carved oak. She said her name was Sister Maud. She told you to speak only when spoken to always bow before the cross, to eat everything on your plate, no matter how sour. Your cell was a small stone room with a wooden cot, a wool blanket, and a crucifix above the door. The window was the size of your hand. You cried that first night, the second night too. By the third, you learned to cry into your pillow so no one would hear. The other girls didn't talk much. There were 5 of you, novices between 8 and 13. They had come from different towns, different stories. Some were orphans. Some were like you, promised to the church because it was cheaper than marrying them off. None of you had chosen it. The days were ordered like liturgy: prime, terce, sext, none, vespers. You rose before dawn and washed your face with water so cold it numbed your skin. You sang psalms until your throat ached. You learned Latin 1 breath at a time, chanting syllables you didn't yet understand. The Benedictine rule governed everything: silence, prayer, labor, obedience, especially obedience. You worked in the herb garden, cutting thyme and yarrow under the watchful eye of Sister Maud. You learned to mix salves, to stitch linen, to scrape candle wax into molds. The scent of tallow clung to your hands no matter how hard you scrubbed. You copied manuscripts in the scriptorium, dipping quills into ink so thick it dried like tar. If your letters were crooked, you were told to redo them. If your lines wavered, you were told too fast. Sister Marjorie oversaw the scriptorium. She was quiet, nearly blind, but her fingers moved over the pages with eerie certainty. She once told you, "Every mistake you make is a prayer you'll say again." You didn't understand what she meant until years later. One afternoon, you snuck a glance out the high window in the chapel. A boy was herding goats in the distance. You watched him laugh as one of the animals charged a stump. It was a foolish thing, just a boy laughing at goats. But something about the freedom in it made your chest ache. Sister Maud saw you. She made you kneel on the chapel stones until your knees bled. The abbess visited your dormitory once a month. She walked the hall with slow, deliberate steps, her veil always perfectly starched. She asked each girl one question: "Is your soul still yours?" Most nodded. Some didn't speak. No one ever said yes. When you were 10, they shaved your head. A rite of passage, they said, a symbol of humility. You stared at your reflection in the polished copper basin and barely recognized yourself. Without your hair, your face looked too bare, too small, too old. They gave you your habit a few months later: plain robe, coarse wool, warm in winter, suffocating in summer. You were now a proper novice, and yet you had not yet taken vows. You were in between, not a child, not a nun, a soul in waiting. There were moments of strange beauty: the chapel, lit with candles on feast days, the scent of rosemary and baking bread in the kitchen, the way snow fell silently in the cloister, garden, and the songs, long aching hymns in Latin that filled the nave and made the stone walls sing back. But beauty is not freedom. You were 13 when Sister Anne ran away. She climbed over the back wall during evening prayers and disappeared into the woods. They searched for her for days. When they found her, cold-soaked, trembling, they carried her back wrapped in a sack. She didn't speak for a week. After that, she never spoke at all. You weren't allowed to see her again. They said she was in prayer. You knew she wasn single quotes, too sometimes, in the cold months. When the wind howled through the cracks in the stone, you wondered if you would ever leave. You had not yet taken your final vows, but the idea of going home felt like a forgotten dream. You couldn't even remember the sound of your father's voice. One spring morning, the abbess summoned you. She told you the time had come. You were old enough now to choose. You could take the veil, or you could leave. It was the first time in years anyone had said choose, but it wasn't really a choice, was it? Where would you go? You had no dowry, no family who wanted you, no skills that would buy more than a crust of bread. The world outside the abbey walls was colder, harder, louder. You said yes. You would stay. That night, as you lay in your cell, listening to the wind scrape along the shutters, you asked yourself, was this God's will, or just your family's convenience? And deep inside, another question settled like a stone in your chest. If you say yes because you have no other option, does God still call it devotion? The morning of your profession is gray, quiet, and colder than expected for spring. You're 17 now, and you've stopped expecting the weather to match the season. The chapel is lit with beeswax candles, thick and slow-burning. The scent is heavy in the air, honey, tallow, old stone. Your bare feet are numb against the flagstones. A small shiver runs through you, but it is not from the cold. Sister Maud stands beside you. She gives you no smile, only a nod. You've come far, she had said once. Not in distance, but in discipline. That was the highest compliment she offered. Before you kneel, they cut your hair again. You've grown used to the sound of scissors against your scalp. The strands fall into a cloth held open by a younger novice. She watches them as if they're petals from a tree. For you, it feels like roots being severed. You prostrate yourself before the altar, arms out, cheek pressed, to the cold stone. The others chant over you in Latin long vowels, measured syllables. You don't translate anymore. The meaning lies more in the repetition than the grammar. You are asked if you will accept poverty, chastity, and obedience for life. You say, yes. You don't stumble. They dress you in a full habit, no blacker wool, a longer veil, and the white wimple that frames your face like a cage. You are no longer in between. You are a bride of Christ. The ceremony ends without celebration, only silence. Your name changes. You are no longer the girl who was brought to the priory with calloused hands and a scared face. You are Sister Cecilia now. The name was chosen for you after the saint who sang to God as she died. You wonder if the original Cecilia also lacked a choice. In the months that follow, life becomes more rigid. You are expected to guide younger novices, to correct them, to remind them of the rule, but you are not harsh. You remember what it felt like to kneel in the cold, to cry into the pillow so no one would hear. You give them what comfort you can, quiet words, extra bread, a longer hug at nightfall. You are moved from garden work to the infirmary. Sister Agnes, the current healer, is nearing 60. Her fingers tremble when she stirs tinctures. You become her hands, her eyes, her memory. The infirmary is a strange place, more human than the rest of the priory. Here, pain and weakness are not shamed, only tended. You clean wounds, mix poultices, wash old women's feet. You touch death often. Sometimes it touches back. You learn to feel a fever in a wrist, to read illness in the rings beneath a novice's eyes. You know the scent of infection before it shows itself. You learn what helps. Garlic for rot, honey for wounds, comfrey for swelling. You also learn what cannot be helped. One winter, a nun in her 40s begins to waste away. No wound, no fever, no sign of poison, just tiredness, silence, and then stillness. The priest says it was God calling her. Sister Agnes says sometimes, a soul just gives up. You do not allow yourself the luxury of giving up. There is one book in the infirmary that fascinates you. It's older than most of the sisters, bound in cracked leather and filled with drawings of herbs, diagrams of the human body, and cramped notes in Latin and Old French. No one knows who wrote it. Sister Agnes says it came from another priory that burned. She lets you copy from it in the evenings. The ink stains your fingers. You feel closer to truth in those pages than you ever did in the chapel. But knowledge is a quiet danger. You are cautioned not to read too freely, not because it is forbidden, but because it invites suspicion. A nun who reads too well, who asks too many questions, who speaks with too much authority, she becomes unnatural. Still, the book calls to you. You learn about the humor's black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood, and how imbalance causes illness. You read about charms used in childbirth, how to turn a breech baby with prayer and pressure. You learn of Saint Hildegard and her visions, her music, her medicine. For the first time, you realize that women have written knowledge into history too, but only when allowed. You write your own notes in the margins, tiny letters, careful lines, a shadowed version of yourself, hidden on paper. Outside the infirmary, the priory endures its usual rhythms. The bishop visits once a year. His presence sends ripples through the community extra, scrubbing, longer prayers, tighter rules. He speaks in sermons about obedience, purity, silence. He never addresses the fact that the priory roof leaks, or that the novices sometimes faint from fasting. During one visit, he questions Sister Annis's use of superstitious remedies. He frowns at the herbs drying on the infirmary walls. The devil hides in green things, he says. You say nothing. You swallow your fury with a mouthful of humility. Later that night, you crush dried fennel and valerian root with more force than necessary. There are moments when you still wonder about the world outside. Not often, just glimpses. When a merchant passes the gates and laughter trails behind him. When a girl receives news from a sister who married. When a storm batters the windows, and you wonder what it's like to run without anywhere to go. Sister Maud dies in her sleep one autumn. She is buried in the priory garden. You help lower her into the grave. Her face looks soft for once, like the stone has finally let go. You take her place teaching the novices. It is not a role you asked for, but you accept it. You teach them how to stitch without puckering the seams, how to slice rosemary fine enough for tincture, how to sing lauds without their voices cracking. But more importantly, you teach them how to endure, how to fold their hands just right, how to bite back a question, how to survive without screaming. Some learn quickly, others break. You mourn each quietly. You are 32 when a new novice arrives, barely 10, rail thin, with bruises she doesn't explain. She flinches at every touch, refuses to speak. You remember what that felt like. You begin again. Gently, you leave her extra honey on her plate. You show her how to comb her hair gently so it doesn't tug. You sit beside her in the chapel even when she won't join the prayers. One night, you find her curled beside your cot. She whispers, "Don't send me away." You promise you won't. That night, for the first time in years, you cry. Not from loneliness, but from the weight of knowing how many girls are locked behind doors they didn't choose in. How many of those doors never open again. Your hair has turned gray at the edges. Your hands are cracked. Your back stiffer than you'd like. But you still walk the cloister garden in the early light. You press rosemary between your fingers. You still copy from the ancient book. You no longer believe everything the abbess says, or even the priest, but you believe in the strength of small acts, in the sound of quiet voices teaching each other to endure, in the power of not turning away. You kneel before the crucifix one evening and wonder if devotion means never leaving. Even when the door is open, does that make you faithful, or simply too used to silence? You rise before dawn, as you always have. The cold no longer bites like it once did. Your body has adapted, or perhaps forgotten, what warmth feels like. The candle on your bedside flickers as you wrap your veil around thinning hair. The old wimple scratches your cheek. You do not mind. You've stopped noticing discomfort. Or rather, you've learned to name it something else: humility. The chapel bell rings. You walk through the cloister garden, your shoes damp from dew. The stones are cracked and dark with moss. You know each one. You've swept them, prayed over them, watched them hold the weight of 100 women walking the same loop. Some left the path by death, madness, or escape. You stayed inside. The others chant in low voices. Your voice joins theirs, Latin, now smooth as breath. You think less of the words than you used to. They are muscle memory now, a rhythm. You wonder sometimes whether prayers need intention to reach God, or if sound alone is enough. Your hands are slower than they used to be. Stirring the salves takes more effort. You drop a jar in the infirmary one morning, glass shatters across the stone. A younger sister rushes to clean it up. She calls you revered Sister Cecilia and pats your hand as if you are a grandmother. You want to protest, but you don't. You are 63. In the priory, that is old. The bell tower no longer chimes with the same strength, and neither do you. Your mind, though it is sharp. You remember every girl who entered those gates. Their faces, their silences, the small acts of rebellion, a stolen fig, a hidden letter, a weeping song hummed under breath. You remember the ones who broke and the ones who learned to bend. You remember Sister Anne, who tried to run. You still visit the wall she climbed over. There is moss growing there now. A bird has nested in the crook of the stones. Life finds places to persist. Even here, you now keep the old herb book beside your cot. The abbess tolerates it barely. The bishop visited last year and frowned at its pages. Too much learning, he said. Not enough scripture. The abbess smiled and tucked it away before he could see your notes, thousands of tiny, ink-dark entries written over a lifetime of quiet observation. Fever patterns, herbal recipes, gentle ways to ease a breach. You have filled the margins with memory. Some nights, after Compline, you sit alone and run your fingers over those pages. You do not call it pride. That word is dangerous. But you allow yourself a moment of recognition. This knowledge is yours. You will not be named in history, but these pages will remember you. One day, a young novice, barely 12, sits with you in the cloister. She has questions, real ones. She asks about childbirth, about fear, about whether God punishes the curious. You do not answer directly. You give her a sprig of chamomile and tell her what it's good for. She watches your hands and learns. You see yourself in her, not in her face, but in her longing. She reads. The sky, the trees, the slow erosion of time across the abbey walls. She dreams bigger than these stones. You want to tell her to run, but you don't instead. You give her your copy of the Psalter, the one your mother packed for you years ago. Inside it, you've hidden a slip of parchment, a map of the village paths, the name of a hedgewoman who might shelter her. You do not sign it. You do not know if she will ever use it, but you have planted the seed. The abbess dies in late summer. You are the oldest nun now. There's talk of appointing a new head, and your name is mentioned, but you decline. You say your hands are too old for rule. You let Sister Julian take the role. She is kind, soft-voiced, unafraid of books. You trust her. Under her, the priory breathes differently. More herbs in the gardens, more teaching in the scriptorium. Still no men beyond the bishop's visit, but fewer punishments. You hear laughter. More often, it is not disruptive. It is healing. One cold morning, as you tend the fire in the infirmary, your chest tightens. Not sharply, just enough to make you sit. You know this feeling. You've seen it in others. You press your hand to your ribs. You wait. A sister finds you later, eyes closed, lips moving in a half-formed psalm. You are taken to your cot. The Infirmary now smells of mint and beeswax. They bring you soup, but you cannot swallow. Your hands tremble too much to hold the bowl. You drift in and out of sleep. In your dreams, you are not Sister Cecilia. You are the girl who chased a rag ball through the courtyard, who stared too long at the boy herding goats, who read by candlelight, with a stolen smile. You are not a bride of Christ. You are just someone who stayed because there was nowhere else to go. And yet, Sue, do not regret everything. You think of the girls you comforted, the pages you filled, the knowledge you preserved in a world that feared women who knew too much. You think of Agnes, the girl who never spoke until you taught her how, of the novice who might still find her way out one day. As your breath thins, you ask yourself the question you've carried for decades. Was this devotion or survival disguised as holiness? And maybe, just maybe, they were the same thing. You first notice the fever in the middle of the night. It isn't the kind that announces itself with convulsions or screams, no. It arrives quietly. Your child is sweating through her linen shift, her small body twisting in sleep, hair pasted to her forehead. Her breath is fast and shallow, and when you lay your palm across her chest, the heat pulses through your skin. She is 2 years old. You are 20-6. It is the year 1372 in York. The plague hasn't returned this year, but you know not to trust silence. You've lived through enough outbreaks to recognize that illness doesn't need permission. It doesn't need a name to ruin you. You light a candle, shielding the flame with your hand. The cottage is small, one room with a hearth, 2 stools, a low table, and a bed of straw. Your husband is away, tending to his dying uncle in another village. You sent him with your blessing. Now you wonder if it was a mistake. You place a damp cloth on your daughter's forehead. She stirs and whimpers, a tiny sound that echoes in your chest. She was healthy yesterday, a bit fussy at supper, but she ate. She even danced to the sound of your singing as you stirred the pot. Now, she won't even open her eyes. You know what comes next? You've seen it in other families. The slow decline, the way a mother rocks a child, even when she's already gone cold. You do not plan to be that mother. At first light, you wrap your daughter in a shawl and tie her to your chest with a length of cloth. Her fever has not broken. Her body radiates heat. Her breath is uneven. You walk into the village with the determination of a soldier. The street is already waking. The blacksmith's boy yawns while sweeping cinders from the forge. A woman pours chamber pot contents into the street. A dog sniffs at the pile and trots off. No one notices you until you knock on the apothecary's door. It opens with a creak. The air smells of vinegar and dried sage. Mistress Ellsworth stands behind the counter, her hands already stained with ink and dust. She doesn't look up. Who is it? You step inside. My daughter, you say. She has a fever. Now she looks. Her eyes settle on the child bound to your chest. The cloth at her neck is soaked through with sweat. Ellsworth frowns. Teeth, she asks. Or gut? I don't know, you whisper. She won't eat. She won't cry. Ellsworth gestures for you to place the child on a stool. You do so carefully. She leans close, peering into the child's mouth, lifting her eyelids. She presses her thin fingers to the child's belly, then her neck. You've seen her do this with chickens, with sick men, with old dogs. It's the same process, the same kind of thinking. She steps back and nods slowly. It's not the plague. Not yet. Not unless the spots come. She disappears into the back room. When she returns, she has a bowl of thick black salve, a pouch of dried bark, and a jar of leeches. You flinch. No, you say. She looks at you. They pulled the heat, she says plainly. They draw it from the blood. You shake your head. The image of them writhing on your daughter's skin is too much. Ellsworth shrugs. Then the bark. Boil it in beer. Make her drink. Salve on the soles of her feet. You reach for your purse. 2 pennies, she says. It is nearly all you have. You pay. At home, the salve smells worse than it looks. Bitter, oily, thick. You spread it across your daughter's feet, then wrap them in cloth. She does not stir. You boil the bark in weak ale, and hold the cup to her lips. She does not drink. You wet a rag and squeeze it into her mouth instead. Every hour, you repeat it. The fever rises. You have no other remedies. No priest, no physician, no help. You sit beside her through the night, hands folded over your stomach, whispering prayers. You half remember Hail Marys, fragments of the Psalms. You promise anything, that you'll go barefoot for a year, that you'll give up sugar, that you'll fast every Friday until death. But nothing changes. By the third morning, your daughter's lips are cracked. Her skin is so hot it burns your hand. Her eyes flutter open only briefly, and when they do, she doesn't seem to see you. She whispers something too quiet to catch. You lean close, but she's already asleep again. In desperation, you return to Ellsworth. She's worse, you say. This time, the apothecary says nothing. She picks up the jar of leeches. You don't have to watch, she says. You close your eyes. She attaches one behind the child's ear. It wriggles, then bites. You gag. The child doesn't move. When it detaches, fat with blood, Ellsworth wipes it away and adds another, then another. By the fourth, you cannot look anymore when it's done. She gives you a different pouch of herbs. For the fever, she says. This one costs nothing. I knew your mother. You nod, tears hot on your cheeks. At home, you burn the herbs in a bowl and hold your daughter over the smoke. It fills the room. You hum the lullaby your mother used to sing, the one about the willow tree and the blackbird. Your voice cracks. Still, you sing. That night, the fever breaks. She wakes just before dawn. Her skin is clammy. Her eyes are cloudy, but she speaks Mama. You collapse to your knees. You press your forehead to hers. You weep. You laugh. You thank a God you're not sure is listening. In the weeks that follow, she grows stronger, slowly. She eats only broth at first, then bread, then small bites of apple. Her cheeks fill out. She sleeps more, but not from illness, just the deep, dreamless sleep of recovery. You return to Ellsworth's shop. She's better, you say. The old woman nods. She need broth with onion and nettle. Keep her warm. No salt, no hard food. You thank her. She gives you another jar of salve. For her feet, she says. Just in case. You offer her more coins, but she waves them away. Save it, she says. For the next illness. Because there will be another. There always is. You walk home with the jar, pressed to your chest like a relic. Your daughter plays in the dirt with a stick that afternoon. She laughs. It's a small sound. Nothing spectacular, but it is the loudest joy you've ever known. You watch her, then look down at your hands. They are steady. They are enough. But deep inside, you ask yourself the question no one ever says aloud. If the leeches hadn't worked, what would you have been willing to try next? It's been 3 weeks since the fever broke. Your daughter's color has returned, and her appetite comes in small, steady waves. You no longer check her breathing while she sleeps, but still wake at night, reaching for her out of instinct. There is a bruising kind of relief in watching her live so effortlessly again. You remind yourself that healing doesn't just mean surviving, it means relearning calm. The days begin to fall back into rhythm, bread to knead, herbs to steep, floor to sweep. But everything feels slightly different now, as if the world has been rearranged, slightly tilted by what could have been lost. You look at her longer. You hold her more tightly than before. Even her laughter rings different in your ears, more precious, more fragile. You begin to speak more often with Mistress Ellsworth. You visit her shop under the pretense of needing balm or tea, but she knows better. She says little about it, simply hands you a stool and pours you water from a clay pitcher. She never asks if you're all right. She waits for your questions instead. One morning, while the child naps, you ask what's in the leach jar. She raises her eyebrows, then sets it down, gently in front of you. Curious? You nod. She opens it slowly, letting the light catch the slick bodies wriggling in the murky water. They come from the marsh, she says. Only take the black ones. The others are cowsuckers, won't take two human flesh. You stare. They are smaller than you remembered, like ribboned worms, their mouths hidden and clever. You feel something between fascination and revulsion. And they work, you ask. Truly, they remove what heat can't be sweated out, she says. The ancients believed the body must be balanced. Fire, water, air, earth. A fever is fire that gets trapped. You think of your daughter's burning skin, her breath like smoke. ELSWYTH sees the doubt on your face. They don't always work, she admits, but sometimes they do, and that's more than most can promise. You ask to help next time. She nods. You don't tell your husband when he returns. He finds the child healthy, and you calm, and that is all he asks for. He speaks of the uncle who died, the inheritance that never came, the cousin who took the last of the livestock. You nod at the right places, and serve him broth. You don't tell him you spent the last of the coin on medicine and prayers. You don't tell him how close it came. That week, Ellsworth lets you help pack herbs for drying. You learn their names by smell. Mugwort, yarrow, tansy, betony. You ask questions. She watches you closely. When you get things right, she doesn't praise you, just hands you the next task. You like that? When a neighbor's boy comes in with a blistered hand, you watch Ellsworth wrap it in a paste of crushed comfrey. And honey? You'd seen the mother before, clutching the boy and begging for God's mercy. But now, in this room, it's not God who offers help. It's a woman with calloused hands and jars lined neatly in rows. You begin to understand something. The physician may wear robes and quote Galen, but it is women like Ellsworth who keep villages alive, quietly, steadily, with poultices and boiled water, with remedies remembered more than read. When the boy leaves, Ellsworth turns to you. Still want to learn? You nod. She teaches you how to dry the bark just enough that it doesn't rot, how to grind seeds without losing the oils, how to boil willow down to its bitter, healing core. You discover that elderflowers can reduce a fever, and that rosemary must be cut in the morning sun if you want it strong. You are surprised at how much you remember, more surprised by how hungry you are to know more. Not everyone approves. One afternoon, the baker's wife eyes you walking into Ellsworth's door and mutters witch's shadow under her breath. You pretend not to hear, but you feel the sting. ELSWYTH shrugs it off. They always need me when the blood won't stop, she says, even the ones who spit. One night, the priest preaches on obedience. He warns of women who overreach their station, who meddle with knowledge meant for God's hand. He doesn't name anyone, but the congregation glances your way. You lower your head. You feel Ellsworth's stillness beside you like a held breath. After the sermon, she walks home in silence. You follow. You shouldn't come again, she says, softly. Not for a while. You stop. But I'm learning, you whisper. And I'm grateful, she says. But the village is small, and you've got a child to feed. You say nothing. She disappears behind her door. That week, your daughter begins coughing. Not a fever, not yet, but deep, rattling. You light the fire higher. You rub her back with goose fat and thyme. You boil water and cover her with cloths soaked in mustard. You do all the things Ellsworth showed you. You do not panic. Still, she coughs. You think of going to the priest. You don't instead, in the middle of the night. You knock on Ellsworth's door. She answers without surprise. Inside, she listens to your daughter's breath. She nods and says, "It's in the chest, not the lung. She'll clear it." Then she adds, if you can get her to sweat. She gives you a mixture of ginger and garlic, something so sharp it burns your throat just smelling it. You hold your daughter close that night, feeding her the bitter drink one spoon at a time. She cries. You sing. You remember the song about the blackbird and the willow again. By morning, the cough has loosened. You sit with her in the sun, wrapped in a blanket, and watch the steam curl from her forehead. You wipe it gently. Her eyes blink open. Mama, she says. You smile. That evening, you write down everything you did. Every herb, every measurement, every moment. You tuck the parchment under a bowl in the corner, just in case, because you've learned something no sermon could teach. The body knows more than the church allows, and the people who understand it best are often the ones no one wants to name. You kiss your daughter's brow and wonder, if knowledge makes them fear you, how much more dangerous would it be to forget? The seasons shift again. Spring becomes summer. Your daughter plays near the stream with sticks and stones, her health fully returned. She wears a crown of clover on her head and sings to herself in nonsense words. Sometimes you stop to watch her without saying anything, just absorbing the fragile wonder of her being alive. You still visit Ellsworth's shop, though now you enter through the back, not because you're ashamed, but because discretion has become your form of armor. The villagers are polite, more or less, but you've noticed the change in their tone. Some step a little wider around you. Others speak in half-finished sentences. You've heard the word wise woman whispered, sometimes with awe, sometimes with fear. You've also heard worse. The priest, you've noticed, preaches more often about Eve these days, about women and temptation, about order. You recognize the pattern. When women gain knowledge, the church preaches louder. Still, you study. Ellsworth has become more than a healer to you. She's a teacher, yes, but also a mirror. She tells you stories of the women who came before her, women who learned the plants from their mothers, women who hid their knowledge inside cookbooks or birth prayers, women who knew how to bring life into the world and how to help it leave when mercy was kinder than survival. You are learning both kinds of knowledge, not because you desire power, but because powerlessness no longer feels tolerable. Your husband is beginning to notice, not the learning itself, but the shift in you. You speak more confidently. You correct him when he misnames an herb. You suggest letting the child sleep longer, drink more nettle broth. When she falls ill again, a mild rash, likely from spoiled bread, you diagnose it yourself. You treat it. He doesn't say thank you, but he doesn't argue either. One night, over a bowl of porridge, he asks, "Where do you get all this from?" You pause. "Ellsworth," you say simply. He frowns. "That old crone." You say nothing. He doesn't press the matter. But the next morning, he reminds you that a woman's place is in the home, not in the herb fields, not in other people's ailments. Later that week, a girl from another village arrives, heavy with child and frightened out of her skin. She's no more than 15. The priest sent her to you. Quietly, he said the girl needed rest and shelter until she figures things out. You take her in. She speaks little, but her fear speaks volumes. She doesn't know who the father is, might be a cousin, might be a stranger from the market. She doesn't know if the child will come early or late, or if it will come at all. You wrap her in blankets, feed her warm broth, brew valerian to calm her. You tell her stories of your own child's fever, of all the ways life bends without breaking. She asks if she's going to die. You say, "Not if I can help it." The child comes in the middle of a storm. The girl cries out only once. You kneel between her legs, cloths in hand, sweat on your brow, just like Ellsworth taught you. You whisper the names of saints you don't truly believe in. The baby emerges slow, but breathing. A girl. The mother weeps. The next day you send her away with bread, herbs, and a blessing. You do not ask where she go. You only tell her to go without shame. That evening Ellsworth visits. She watches you silently as you wash the soiled linens. "You delivered alone?" she asks. You nod. She doesn't smile. She just hands you a jar of mint salve and says, "For your back." Word spreads. They always do. A widow from the edge of the village knocks on your door with a weeping eye and a shaking hand. A boy with a twisted ankle comes next. Then a mother whose infant won't suckle. You become quietly what no one dared call you out loud, a healer. The priest visits you once. You offer him tea. He doesn't drink it. He asks careful questions, his eyes lingering on the dried herbs above your hearth. He warns against pride, against meddling in what is not yours to mend. You nod politely. You offer him a jar of honey for his cough. He declines, but he doesn't stop you either. One afternoon, your daughter brings you a dead bird. "It fell from the sky," she says. "Can you fix it?" You look at the small broken thing. You touch its feathers. "Not this time," you say. She nods solemnly and helps you bury it beneath the rosemary. She is growing fast, asking questions you once feared. Why the priest never smiles. Why her cousin never came back from the abbey. Why you know so many things that no one else does. You begin teaching her slowly, not just the names of herbs, but how to listen. To people. To symptoms. To the body's quiet cries before it breaks. Elswyth grows frail. Her hands shake more. She speaks less. One night she tells you, "It's nearly your time now." You think she means time to take over her work. She doesn't mean that. She dies the following winter. In her sleep, you bury her with thyme and fennel in her hands, her old leather book beneath her head. The villagers come to her funeral. Some cry, others mutter. No one calls her what she was, but they come anyway. You open her shop. No one stops you. Years pass. Your daughter grows tall, wise-eyed, clever with her fingers. People say she looks like you. She learns fast. She asks for books. You find some. She asks about leeches. You show her. She asks what else you know. You open the old box beneath your bed. The one with your notes, your charts, your letters never sent. You show her what you've hidden and what you've kept alive. She reads late into the night. You smile, because the priest still preaches and the men still sneer. But your daughter is learning the cure before she's taught to fear it. One day, she will help someone else's child survive a fever. And maybe they'll never know the story that came before, but you will. Because in a world that made you beg for knowledge, you learned anyway. You remember what Ellsworth once told you. Knowing is the most dangerous thing they can't take from you. And now you ask yourself, if you've saved 100 lives in secret, how many more would have been lost if you'd obeyed? You wake in darkness, long before the cock crows. Your back is sore from the uneven straw mat, your knees stiff from the cold. The fire in the hearth has gone out, and your breath fogs in front of you. It is the year 1298. You are a peasant woman in a small village along the Welsh marches, and your life, from the moment your eyes open, is already behind schedule. Your husband lies beside you, snoring. The baby stirs in the corner, where she sleeps wrapped in a woolen shawl. You move slowly, pulling on your coarsely woven kirtle and apron, trying not to wake anyone. You wrap your hair in a cloth modesty, always, and begin your day first. The fire. You kneel before the cold hearth, fingers red and stiff, as you coax the coals back to life. A handful of dried moss, a twist of straw, your breath held like prayer. When the flames catch, they feel like mercy. You hang the kettle last. Night's water, now tepid and cloudy. It will be boiled and drunk with bits of onion and stale crust, if you have it. Then, the animals. You step outside into the dim blue light of early morning. The sky is colorless, the wind damp. The pigs are restless. You throw them scraps boiled turnip skins, a rind of cheese, and watch them push against each other with hungry snorts. You collect eggs from the hens. thankful the fox didn't come in the night. Next comes the bread. You grind grain with the hand quern, shoulders aching from the weight of it. The flour is rough, flecked with grit, but it will rise. You mix it with water and sourdough saved from yesterday, knead it with cold fingers, set it to rest near the hearth. By midday it will be baked, hard on the outside, soft enough in the center to keep your family full. Barely, your daughter cries. You stop everything. She is 3 years old, feverish, snot-crusted, clinging to you with hot hands. You carry her on your hip while stirring the kettle. You bounce her gently while tending to the garden. There is no nursemaid, no rest. Your body bends to hold her and to keep moving. You dig leaks from the dirt, wipe mud on your apron, and wonder if the baby will make it through the winter. Last year, your neighbor lost a two. They were pink-cheeked and healthy one day, gray and silent the next. You do not weep, not now. You learned that lesson already. By mid-morning, the village wakes properly. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. Children chase chickens between houses. The reeve walks the path to the manor with his ledger, muttering. You nod when he passes. Keep your head down. It's safer that way. You help your neighbor, Joan, thatch her leaking roof with new bundles of straw. You climb carefully, dress soaked through with dew. Your fingers bleed where the rough reed cuts them. No one notices. By the time you're done, the baby has stopped crying. You check her, still breathing. You bake the bread. It burns at the edges, but no one complains. You feed your husband and son. You eat last, as always. You don't mind hunger is an old companion, and you know how to silence it. You spend the afternoon combing wool. The motion is rhythmic, almost meditative pull. Smooth, pick. Your mind drifts. You think of the stories your mother used to tell, about the virgin spinning gold, about saints who never bled. You smile bitterly. Your hands are red with the truth. You make ale, weak, sour, but enough to drink without getting sick. You boil water, steep the grains, let it cool. The scent fills the cottage, something alive, fermenting. Later, your husband will drink 2 cups and thank you without words. There is a visit from the priest around sunset. He stops by to bless the child, not because she's dying, but because he fears she might. He places a hand on her head, mumbles Latin, accepts your bread in return. As he leaves, he reminds you to come to confession. You nod. You will not go. Night comes quickly in late autumn. The work doesn't end. You patch your son's tunic by candlelight. Your eyes ache. You rock the baby while stirring oat gruel, the spoon bumping the edge of the pot in a slow, sleepy rhythm. You check for lice in her hair. You find 3. You feed the pigs again. You put the hens to roost. You draw water for tomorrow. You kneel and scrub the blood from your shift. Your monthly bleeding has returned, unwelcome but expected. You will still cook and kneel and lift despite the cramps. There is no word for pain in your day, only delay. You lie down when the fire is low. Your husband snores again. The baby's chest rises and falls, rises and falls. You stare at the roof, counting the holes. You feel your breasts ache from nursing. Your knees throb from kneeling. Your shoulders burn from lifting. You think of your sister, the one who joined the priory when she turned 12. She writes once a year, neat, cold Latin on a scrap of parchment. She writes about silence, prayers, and cheese-making. You envy the stillness of her life. She envies your child. The irony is lost on no one. You do not dream when you sleep. Your body is too tired. And yet, in the last waking moment, your mind whispers, if I stop moving, what will unravel first, my body, or everything it's holding together? The rooster calls before you open your eyes. It doesn't matter. You've already been awake for half an hour, listening to the slow creaks of the wind against the shutter and your husband's breath beside you. Your body is sore again, a dull throb behind your ribs and a sharp pinch in your hip when you rise. You're 35. You feel older. You roll from the straw mattress carefully and begin the morning's rhythm. Same as yesterday and the hundreds before it. Stoke the fire, feed the pigs. Check the child's breath. Boil the water, crush the grain. There is no surprise in it, only the comfort of predictability. You've learned that in a world like yours, change is rarely good. Your husband is already dressed and gone off to the Lord's field to serve his 3 days of unpaid labor. It's harvest season, and the village is quiet, except for the buzz of scythes and the barking of orders from the reeve. The manor claims the best grain, the most fertile soil, the ripest apples. What's left filters back down to the villagers. Like crumbs from a feast. You take your daughter by the hand and set off to the communal fields with your basket strapped across your back. Today is weeding, and though your name isn't on the rota, no one protests the extra hands. More hands mean faster work, and faster work means less chance of punishment. You join the other women, bent at the waist, skirts muddy, hands deep in the dirt. The field smells like turned earth and sweat. The sun climbs slowly. Your back aches within the hour, but you press on, ignoring the sting behind your knees and the bugs crawling along your arms. The child toddles along beside you, picking rocks and humming nonsense songs. She is your shadow now, quieter than most children her age. You wonder if that's because she's seen you cry more than laugh. Someone jokes that the weeds grow faster than the barley. No one laughs. It's not a funny season. At midday, the bell at the chapel rings out, calling the villagers to pause. The men wipe their brows and sit in clumps under trees. The women cluster together, sharing bread, gossip, and complaints. You chew a crust of dry rye and sip thin ale. Someone offers you a pickled onion, and for a moment, your spirits lift. Then, the conversation turns, as it often does, to the priest and the new tax levies. There are whispers of a second tithe this year, one for the church and another for the king's war. The French are always at war. You don't know where Aquitaine is. You only know it costs you. Back at work, a boy from the manor arrives on horseback. He carries a message from the steward. All villagers must provide 1 extra day's labor this week. No pay, no exception. The women groan. One swears under her breath. You say nothing, but your shoulders sink lower. By late afternoon, your fingertips are raw and your lower back feels like it's been struck with a cudgel. The child has fallen asleep under a hedge. You scoop her into your arms and begin the walk home. Your legs burn. Your head spins a little from the sun. When you reach the cottage, the fire is dead again. You forgot to prepare extra wood. You set the girl down gently and begin splitting kindling. The axe handle is rough, the blade dull, but it works. You remind yourself to ask the cooper for sharpening stones, though he'll want eggs in return. And the hens have been stubborn lately. Dinner. Is soup again? Onion, barley, cabbage. No meat. You scrape the bottom of the pot and wish for just a pinch of salt. The child eats slowly. Your son barely speaks. He's grown sullen in recent years. 15 now, nearly a man. He wants out of this village, but there's nowhere to go. Your husband returns just after sundown, red-faced and stiff. You help him pull off his boots. He grunts his thanks. You ask how the manor fields were. He shrugs. Same as always. Harder. You ask if the steward mentioned wages. He laughs. For what? My bones. Later, when the children are asleep, you sit outside and comb your hair. The night smells of smoke and cut grass. A fox barks in the distance. You watch the moon rise over the tree line, pale and swollen. You remember a time, long ago, when your mother told you life would get easier once your children could help. You believed her? You didn't know then that as your children grow stronger, so do the burdens they must carry. Inside, your husband sleeps soundly. You sit a little longer, hands resting on your lap. You feel the lines in your skin, the ache in your joints, the emptiness in your belly. You realize it's been a week since you last felt joy. Not sadness, there's no time for sadness. Just a deep, quiet nothing. Then the church bell rings out across the hills. One long peal, a fire, a death. You wait nothing. You go back inside and lie beside your daughter, curling your body protectively around hers. Her breath is even, her skin cool. Her hands still clutch a bit of cloth, and in that moment, you think of the word enough, not as something you possess, but as something you fight to create. You ask yourself, if this is what life will always be, what will be left of you by the time it's finally your own? The harvest comes late this year. The rains arrive too early, flattening the barley, soaking the hayricks before they could be thatched. The wind has a sharpness now, cutting through your woolen dress like a knife. Your daughter's cough has returned, not the deep kind that rattles her bones, just the shallow, dry one that signals the changing season. Still, you worry. You always do. It's been over a decade since your wedding. You remember none of it now, only the echo of the vows, mumbled over stale ale, and a priest too drunk to look you in the eye. You were 16. Your husband was 22. The marriage was a transaction, like a lease on a plow or a cow. It came with expectations, not affection. You gave him 2 children. You gave him your hands, your time, your body, your name. You gave so much that you stopped noticing what was being taken. But now, standing in the barley fields with the wind tugging at your headscarf, you realize your body is not yours, your hours are not yours, and even your thoughts feel borrowed. This morning, the steward arrived with a list. Each family must provide a tithe of grain and labor. Failure to comply will result in fines or worse, the loss of your small garden strip near the stream. It's not fertile land, but it's yours. In theory, you grow cabbage and leeks there. It's how you made it through last winter. You sign with your mark and X and say nothing. What would words change? Later, as you hang wet linens by the fire, your son storms into the cottage, flushed and shaking. He's just come from the manor fields, where the reeve caught a boy stealing turnips. The boyno, older than 13, was beaten in front of the others. You ask if it was someone he knew. He doesn't answer. That night, the boy doesn't eat. You wrap a cloth around his shoulders and sit beside him. He leans into you, just slightly, and you remember what it felt like to hold him as an infant, weighty, full of need. You almost forgot he was ever that small. You whisper, you won't always be stuck here. It's a lie, but one that keeps him alive a little longer. The days get colder. Your hands begin to crack again. The soap you made from lard and ashes stings your knuckles, but you keep scrubbing. The bedding must be clean. The child's cough must not spread. You burn rosemary on the hearth and press warm stones to her chest. It's not medicine, but it is something. You tend the garden in the early frost. The leeks hold on. The cabbage wilts. The weeds come back, as they always do. One day the priest visits to collect the church tax. You hand him a sack of barley, smaller than last year. He frowns but says nothing. You notice his boots are new. His hands are soft. He reminds you to come for confession. You do not go. Instead, you climb the ridge behind the village, where the ruins of an old Roman tower crumble into the soil. You sit there sometimes, alone, watching the fields below, thatched roofs, the crooked paths, the tiny movements of people surviving. You bring your daughter with you once. She asks what the broken stones were, a place people lived. You say. She asks why it fell. You don't answer. She plays with a stick and sings to herself, and you wonder how long her voice will stay light. You know what's coming. Winter, another season of frozen feet and silent hunger. Your stores are low. The hens are laying less. The pigs grow lean. Your husband talks of cutting more wood to sell. You talk of tightening belts. The child coughs again. Still, you rise each day. Work, bleed, repeat. You patch socks with wool from an old tunic. You trade eggs for wax to seal the windows. You boil bones for soup. You hold the child until her coughing subsides. You kneel beside her bed and press your lips to her forehead. She sleeps. You do not. One evening, you hear a neighbor died. Joan, the one you helped with thatching 2 years ago. Fever took her. No priest came. She left behind 4 children. The manor will take the eldest boy as a bonded servant. The rest will scatter, probably to a relative or the poorhouse. You hold your daughter tighter that night. Later, you sit at the hearth with a candle stub and a piece of worn parchment. You trace your finger over the edges. You don't know how to, right? But sometimes you pretend. You pretend to list the things you've done this week. Carried 4 buckets of water. Washed 6 loads of linen. Scraped ice from the hearthstones. Healed a child. Saved a garden from frost. Endured. You fold the parchment and tuck it inside your shoe. Though it bears no words. The days shorten. The fire grows weaker. But you're still here. You know no one will record your name. The steward will not write of you. The priest will not mention you in his sermons. History will not remember the woman who boiled barley and buried chilblains in the garden. But your child will remember your hands. Your son will remember your silence as strength. The wind will remember your breath in the garden, and the earth cold, stubborn, brutal will remember the weight of your steps. You rise one last time that night, checking the windows, the fire, the breath of the ones you love. You lie down and whisper to the dark, if I disappear tomorrow, how many of these tasks will still carry my shape? You feel it before you see anything, low, slow, heavy. The ache begins in your back and moves forward, like a belt pulled tight around your middle. It doesn't stop, just pulses. You brace yourself against the doorframe and breathe. It is the 4th time today. You are 18, and the child you carry is your first. The year is 1311, and the village midwife says it's nearly time. She told you to watch for the blood, the ache, the sudden shift in how your hips feel. You understand now what she meant. The baby has dropped low in your belly, pulling you down with it. You've been preparing for this for weeks. The straw in the birthing corner was replaced yesterday. You gathered linen cloths, scrubbed the small wooden tub, and boiled water until the pot steamed. Your neighbor brought you a sprig of rue, tucked in a scrap of cloth, to ward off the screaming. You thanked her, though you know it's not the herbs that keep the screams away, it's the fear that no one will come if you make too much noise. Your husband is out in the fields. He does not ask questions about childbirth. It isn't out of cruelty. He simply sees it as another labor, one of many. He knows your body was made for this, or so the priest says. You are made to bear, to bleed, to endure. You sit on the stool, bent forward, hands gripping your knees. Another wave. It is stronger now, sharper. You rock, like you've seen other women do. You remember watching your sister birth her second child, her face red and sweat-drenched, her hands clawing the earth. The midwife said it was easier with the second. This being your first, no one has said the word easy to you. The midwife arrives just after dusk. She's older than you remembered. Her fingers are stained with herbs and ink, and her eyes are sharp even in the candlelight. She does not ask if you're ready. She simply kneels beside you and presses a hand to your belly. Still high, she mutters. But it won't be long now. You feel your breath quicken. She sets her things near the hearth. A small bag of clean cloth, a flask of bitter tincture, a long spoon carved from ashwood, and a thin leather strap. You know what? It's for something to bite. She doesn't mention it. She doesn't need to. Another woman arrives. Joan, the widow who lives near the chapel. She's assisted at many births. She places a pot of broth over the fire and folds linen into neat piles. She smiles at you gently, but her eyes are serious. The pain is steady now, strong enough to take your breath. You lean forward, pressing your hands to the floor, hips wide, knees trembling. You feel the shift deep inside, like your bones are opening. The midwife watches. She says nothing yet. Breathe with it, Joan says. Don't fight. You nod, sweat dripping into your eyes. Time becomes liquid. You don't measure it in hours, only in pains. One after another. Like a tide, rolling in, pulling parts of you away. You no longer speak. You moan. You curse once, and Joan gently wipes your brow. The midwife checks you. Her hand is firm, and the pain makes you twist. Still a bit of time, she says. Baby's head is coming round. You want it to be now. You want it to be over. You vomit into a bucket. The stew from supper. You feel lighter and emptier, but the pain doesn't pause. The midwife gives you a draught of something bitter. You drink it without asking what's in it. She smears salve on your inner thighs. It stings, but you welcome the distraction. Outside, the wind is picking up. You hear shutters clatter. You think of the child moving down like a stone through water. You remember that once, long ago, you danced barefoot in the spring mud and laughed. Now your feet are braced against the floor, your heels slipping on straw. Finally, the midwife nods. It's time. You cry out. The pressure is unimaginable, like your body is breaking in two. You squat, supported on either side. You push. The pain blurs into sound. You grunt. You howl. You fall forward, and someone pulls you upright again. Push, the midwife says. I am. You cry. Again. Your hands claw at the floor. You bear down. The fire crackles behind you. The candlelight wavers. You think you see stars, though you know you're inside. There, Joan says, crowning. You pant, shaking. Don't stop, the midwife warns. You push again, harder than you thought possible. Something slips, wet and burning. You scream. And then, a flood fluid and blood. And something solid. The baby slides out into the world with a final grunt. Silence then. A cry weak, high, real dot. Joan laughs. The midwife lifts the child, cutting the cord with a dull blade and wrapping it in cloth. A girl, she says. You slump against the stool, trembling, hollow. You don't care what it is. You just want to sleep. The afterbirth follows slower, messier, more blood. The midwife presses your belly hard, murmuring that it must all come out. You sob quietly. They place the baby at your side. She's red and wrinkled, mouth open in protest. Her fists ball at her chest. She smells like iron and milk and something new. You do not smile. Not yet. You are too tired. The midwife checks you for tearing. You have a shallow one. No stitching, just rest. She pours warm water between your legs, and the sting makes you hiss. She doesn't apologize. Joan gives you the broth. You drink it slowly, each sip anchoring you back into your body. Your hands no longer shake. Your legs still ache. The baby latches. You wince at first. Then your body remembers. The midwife packs up her tools. Joan tidies the bloodied straw. You lie back and let your eyes close. You did it. You survived. But you know this is only the beginning. The child sleeps on your chest. Her weight is new, foreign, permanent. You whisper her name once into the air. The bleeding doesn't stop. It slows, yes, but never stops. 3 days have passed since your daughter's birth. And still, you wake each morning with the wet warmth of blood soaking the linen beneath you. The midwife says it's normal. The womb has to empty, she murmurs, dabbing at your thighs with a cloth soaked in vinegar and lavender. But she glances at the blood when she thinks you're not looking. She frowns when she sees the stains. She leaves the cottage a little too quickly each time she visits. You lie in the birthing corner, a woolen blanket pulled to your chin, a compress on your belly, the baby nestled at your side. Her name is Alice, and she sleeps well, feeding in. Short, hungry bursts, and crying only when she's cold. She smells like sweet milk and damp cloth. Her presence is constant, a tiny flame against the chill that's taken hold of your body. You try to focus on her, on the weight of her tiny hand curled against your chest, but your mind drifts. You are cold. Not the kind of cold that can be solved with fire, but the kind that lives in your bones. You shiver in bursts, then sweat through your clothes. You know this isn't right. The midwife brings a hot drink made of elderflower and mugwort. She tells you to stay still, to rest, but rest is impossible when the ache continues. It's not the sharp pain of labor, the dull, grinding throb of something unfinished. You know your body well enough to feel when it is not healing. You feel open, not just below, but in your center, as though something vital was taken from you with the child. Your mother visits. She brings boiled eggs and stale bread soaked in broth. She doesn't say much, just fusses over the baby and shakes her head at the smell in the room. You need to open the shutters, she mutters, though the cold wind outside makes your teeth chatter. She mentions a woman she knew years ago, who bled for a month after her 5th child and died in her sleep. You nod. She doesn't mention that it was her sister. She doesn't have to. Your husband is quiet. He holds the child awkwardly, afraid of her smallness, her wet mouth, her flailing arms. He does not ask how you are. You wonder if he knows how. He leaves each morning to the fields and returns each evening with dirt on his boots and weariness in his shoulders. You see in him a kind of fear he doesn't know how to name. You begin to smell it beneath the linen, beneath the salt and vinegar, a sharp, coppery rot. You bathe in the basin by the hearth, too weak to stand. The water turns pink. You rinse and scrub, but it lingers. You change the cloths every few hours. The midwife gives you a charm to wear, tied with red thread and a feather tucked inside. You don't believe in charms, but you wear it anyway. On the 5th day, the fever comes. It begins in your spine, a tight, searing heat that climbs to your neck. Your head throbs. Your mouth dries out. When you try to sit up, the room swims. You cry out, and the baby startles. Your husband runs to fetch the midwife, and when she arrives, her face turns grave. She does not tell you what's wrong, but she tells your mother to bring in the priest. You understand then, without needing words. The priest comes with his book and a flask of holy water. He sprinkles it on your forehead and mutters the rites in Latin. You drift in and out, your body heavy and wet. The child cries nearby, but the sound seems far away. You feel untethered from your limbs, from the cottage, from the world. The pain is distant now. The fear isn't. You know how many women have died like this quietly, anonymously, in the same straw where they birthed life just days before. At some point, the fever breaks. You wake drenched in sweat, your skin slick and cold. The midwife is asleep beside the hearth, her apron spotted with blood. Your husband sleeps beside the baby, curled in a chair. Your mother sits at the foot of your bed, her hands clasped. You stayed. You whispered. She nods. The bleeding has slowed. Your body, though wrecked, is intact. You live, but you are not unchanged. In the following days, you begin to recover, slowly. You eat broth, then porridge, then a piece of hard cheese. You walk across the room. You comb your hair. You feed the baby from your own breast. These are victories, though no one calls them that. The midwife comes one last time and nods approvingly at your strength. You'll have another within the year, she says. You do not answer, because that's the truth of it. Your body is not yours. It is expected to perform again and again. Birth is not an exception. It is routine, a cycle, like planting, like slaughtering, like firewood. When the church bell tolls a week later, you ask who has died. The answer, hey, girl in the next village, 16, her first birth. Baby lived, someone says. Girl didn't. You feel the weight of that like another fever. You hold Alice to your chest. She sleeps with her mouth open, a soft whimper in her throat. You rock her gently and wonder what she remember of you. If she grow up strong, if she be taught that childbirth is natural, or if she learned the truth sooner. The truth is this: giving life means risking your own, and no one writes your name on a wall for surviving. They just expect you to do it again. You return to your but steady. You sweep, you boil, you mend. No one praises you. No one speaks of what you endured. It's done. It's over. That's all they say. But you remember every second of it. The burning, the silence, the blood, and in the quiet moments, when Alice sleeps and the fire crackles low, you stare into the flames and ask yourself, how many women bled just like me without witnesses, without prayers, without mercy, and were never even missed? 3 years pass. Your daughter grows tall and lean, quick on her feet, with sharp eyes that watch everything. She sings while digging in the garden, hums to herself while you stir the pot or sew a hem. Her hair is always tangled. Her knees are always scraped. She asks many questions, and for now, you answer them honestly. She knows she came from your body. She points to the corner of the cottage and says, "That's where I was born." You nod, and you do not tell her that you nearly died there. You want her to think of birth as a beginning, not the threat it so often is. You carry another child now. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't avoided either. That's not how things work. Your husband came to your bed one night with ale on his breath and a heaviness in his limbs. You let him. You didn't say no. There's no use in refusing when it's expected. The child took hold quickly. Your belly swelled before the frost thawed. The midwife visited once, pressed her hands too. Your womb smiled. "Quickening soon," she said. You smiled back, but felt nothing yet. This time, the pregnancy is heavier. Your legs cramp. Your back aches sooner. The child sits low and presses hard against your bladder. You feel slower, weaker, older, even though you're not yet 22. You wake with pain in your hips. Your appetite vanishes for days. The neighbor says it's a boy, something about the way you're carrying. You don't argue. It doesn't matter what it is, only whether it survives, only whether you do. One morning, as you stir porridge over the fire, your daughter tugs your sleeve and asks if she can help when the baby comes. "Like Aunt Joan," she says, proudly. You smile gently and say, "Perhaps," but you think of blood, of cries, of how you bit the strap until your teeth hurt. You think of the days afterward, the heat in your skull, the sting between your legs, the silence of those who had seen too much to ever speak of it. You wonder if she learned that one day, whether you want her to or not. When the time comes, it is earlier than expected. You feel the first pain while grinding barley, a tightness that seizes you mid-motion and nearly knocks you to your knees. You lean on the quernstone and exhale slowly. Then again, 10 minutes later, sharper. You do not panic. You send your daughter to fetch Joan, then light the fire and boil water. You lay out clean linen and prepare the stool. You brace yourself. Joan arrives breathless, followed by the midwife not long after. This one is younger than the last, newly come from another village where too many women had died to keep her employed. She smiles too easily. She tells you that women are stronger than they think. You say nothing. You have no interest in comfort, only facts. The pains come hard and fast. There's little time between them. Your knees go weak. You cling to the doorframe, then to Joan's shoulder, then to the stool. The child is in a rush, sliding downward with terrible force. The midwife presses your belly and frowns. "Head first," she says, but not with confidence. The fire dims. The room grows close. You are soaked in sweat. You cry out, not once but again and again. The push burns like fire. The midwife tells you not to strain, but you cannot help it. The body takes over. Then, a moment of silence. You feel it, the baby slipping from your body in a rush of fluid. You sag forward in relief. Your breath comes in gasps. Then the silence continues. You do not hear crying. You do not hear anything. You look up. Joan is pale. The midwife is still holding the baby, her back turned. You try to speak, but your mouth is dry. You sit up, shaking, and whisper, "Why isn't it crying?" The midwife doesn't answer. Joan takes the child. She presses her ear to its chest, rubs its back, gently at first, then harder. Still nothing. You reach out. "Let me see." They turn, slowly, and place the baby in your arms. It is a boy. His skin is pale, mottled, a faint blue-gray. His lips are parted, but no sound comes. His chest does not rise. Thought. The midwife murmurs. "Stillborn." You stare down at him. He is warm still, soft and real. He feels like a promise, like hope undone. You rock him gently, out of instinct, out of denial. He does not stir. You touch his nose, his fingers. You kiss his head. You feel as if something inside you has turned to ash. There are no words, no prayers. Joan lays a cloth over the baby. The midwife presses your hand and murmurs something about how these things happen. "God's will," she says. You turn your face to the wall. The afterbirth comes. More blood. You barely notice. You're too far away, somewhere inside yourself, folded and sealed. Joan cleans around you. The midwife whispers with your husband in the doorway. You hear the word bury, but nothing else. Your daughter peeks around the corner and sees your face. She freezes. You do not know what she understands. But later, when you wake, she is curled beside you, her small hand wrapped around your wrist. The next morning, your son is wrapped in cloth and buried near the hedge behind the chapel. There is no marker. The priest says a few words. You do not go. You cannot. That night, your milk comes in. Your breasts ache with it, heavy and leaking, with no child to feed. You bind them tightly with linen strips. You wake in the night, soaked and shaking. The pain is worse than you imagined. You cry out, and your husband brings you water, but says nothing. 3 days pass, then 4. You eat a little. You walk outside. The wind smells of frost and smoke. You tend the fire. You wash the linens. You braid your daughter's hair. You go on. No one speaks of the baby. No one mentions his name. There is no name. But every night, before sleep, you place your hand over your belly, where he once was. You feel the empty space like an echo, a silence that hasn't stopped ringing. And you think, without bitterness, but without peace, if a child is born and never breathes, was he ever yours at all? You stand before the wooden chest with your fingers wrapped around the woolen gown, hesitant. It's the only one you own that isn't brown, gray, or sun-bleached blue. A deep russet, faded at the hem, but still bright enough to draw eyes. You haven't worn it in months, not since your cousin's wedding. Today you consider it, then fold it back into the chest. You'll wear the dull blue instead. It's safer, and safety, you've learned, is more important than beauty. It is the year 1354. You are a spinster, by village standards 28, unmarried, and working in the household of a Reeves widow. You serve, you mend, you sweep. You are neither poor nor rich, neither young nor quite old. You exist somewhere in between, a space where attention is a kind of danger, and invisibility is a form of freedom. Still, every day, you must decide what to put on your body, and every day, that decision speaks on your behalf. Clothing is not a choice, is a message. It tells people where you belong, what you're worth, who owns you, and how closely you follow the rules. In towns, these rules are written into law. In villages like yours, they are enforced with glances, whispers, and the tightening of space. Around you in the chapel pews, the sumptuary laws, passed by the crown and murmured down through lords and stewards, dictate that no one of your class may wear silk, velvet, or certain dyes. Scarlet, especially, is forbidden, not because it's immoral, but because it is expensive. imported, powerful. To wear scarlet, when you earn your bread with your hands, is an act of arrogance, a claim to status you have not been given. Even the faded russet gown, bought second-hand from a traveling widow, walks the edge of impropriety. You only wear it for feast days or weddings, and even then, with a cloak drawn tightly around your shoulders. But some women do push the edge. You've seen it. A ribbon too fine, a trim too elaborate, laces crisscrossed in a manner borrowed from the ladies who live behind stone manor walls. These women are rarely admired. They are called bold, loose, unnatural, sometimes worse. You remember Alice, the baker's niece, who embroidered red thread along the cuffs of her wedding kirtle. The dye was cheap and bled in the rain, but it stood out. People talked. They said it wasn't proper for a girl of her means. A year later, when her husband died suddenly of a fever, people whispered again. That red, they said, tempting fate, tempting men, tempting God. You also remember Marjorie, who wore green, always. Green for May Day, green for church, green even in Lent. She said it suited her eyes. But after she was found pregnant, unmarried, the green was suddenly a sign, not of fertility, as it had once been, but of wickedness. They said she must have worn it to lure someone, to trap him. She was sent to the next parish for penance. She returned a year later with hollow cheeks and a child that died before its first winter. You learned from them. You chose your colors carefully. Nothing too bright, nothing too new. You stitch your gowns by hand, slow and small, and you wash them until the color softens. You let the wind fade them. You don't trim your sleeves too close or let your hem fall too high. You wear your hair covered, even in the garden. But even modesty draws comment. Your blue dress fits well across the shoulders. It's all you have on once. A man in the alehouse said you wore it like a promise. You left early that night and did not return for weeks. The Reeves widow you serve is kind but cautious. She notices everything. When you patched her best tunic with thread dyed too dark, she said nothing. But you found the garment undone and repatched by someone else the next morning. She would not risk being mistaken for someone of higher status. She knows what people say when they think a woman is reaching above her station. Still, the temptation creeps in. You pass the market stalls in town and see the colors you're not supposed to wear: deep forest greens, burnished golds, soft grays, like morning mist. You finger the edge of a dyed linen cap once, just once, and the merchant watches you with a smirk. For your mistress, he asks. You nod and leave without buying. Sometimes you wonder what it would feel like to be dressed in crimson, the way the noblewomen wear it during church festivals, trailing embroidered sleeves behind them like banners. You wonder if wearing red makes them feel powerful, or if they simply assume they were always meant to be seen. For you, to be seen is risk. You remember a young girl in the next village who sewed red thread into the hem of her shift for love, a secret mark for her sweetheart to find. Someone saw it drying on the line. She was called forward in the next sermon, made to confess her vanity. She had to wear a woolen scapular dyed black for a month. People threw nettles at her as she passed, all for thread. But you also know women who resist more quietly. A widow who lines her sleeves with pale yellow silk hidden on the inside, soft against the skin but invisible to the eye. A mother who embroiders tiny vines on her daughter's collar, so small they look like shadows, unless you're looking for them. A weaver who dyes her undergarments with berries, so that only she knows what color she wears. Small rebellions, hidden ones, enough to keep something of themselves alive. You think about this as you sit by the fire at night, hemming the edge of your only winter cloak. The thread is brown. You consider, just briefly, the bit of blue tucked in your sewing kit. You imagine one stitch, just one, that only you would know was there. You do not take it out, but you think about it for a long time. Tomorrow is market day. You'll walk past the bolts of cloth, the ribbons, the caps and pins. You'll keep your eyes lowered, your hands folded. You'll walk with care. You always do. But tonight, as you fold your faded gown and tuck it back into the chest, you pause. Your hand lingers on the russet wool. The color has dulled, but it still carries something, an echo of brightness, of boldness. You imagine putting it on, stepping into the road, and letting the world look dot, and for just one moment, you allow yourself the thought, what if wearing red didn't mean shame, or pride, or sin? What if it simply meant you were alive, and you wanted the world to remember that? You didn't mean to become a seamstress. It happened the way most things do, in your world out of need, not design. The Reeves widow began losing her eyesight, first in the evenings, when the candlelight blurred her thread, then in the mornings, when she could no longer tell navy from black. You began helping. First simple tasks, threading needles, sorting linen, then mending cuffs, darning socks, hemming skirts. Soon, entire garments passed through your hands. She taught you what she could still remember, and the rest you taught yourself. Within a year, you were doing it all. It became your trade. Unofficial, of course. A village woman with no guild has no claim to the word craft. You have no workshop, no apprentices, no rights. You cannot speak at market, nor set your own prices. You work from a stool by the hearth, with a lap full of wool and eyes that burn from smoke. Still, the women come. They come quietly, early in the morning or late in the evening, skirts tucked and voices low. You mend their aprons and reinforce their bodices. You patch holes that have grown too wide to hide. You rework sleeves and cut down old garments for younger daughters. You save scraps of good linen and stiff canvas in a basket by the fire. Bits too small for a tunic, but too valuable to throw away. Sometimes a piece of fabric is all someone has to barter, and every so often, someone asks for something more. A bit of ribbon, dyed too brightly for Sunday wear. A collar, just a little higher or lower than is considered decent. Once, a girl, not yet 15, asked if you could stitch a row of dark blue forget-me-nots along the hem of her shift. Tiny, quiet ones, meant only for her to see. You did it. You didn't ask why. They trust you. They call you careful, not clever. They say you're modest, and kind, and safe. That word again, safe, a compliment with teeth. It means you won't ruin their reputations, that you won't spread gossip, that you know your place and will help them keep theirs. You do, mostly, but sometimes, when your hands are busy and your mind is not, you remember the woman who passed through the village years ago. She came from London, or said she did. Her boots were fine leather, though cracked at the toe. She wore her cloak off one shoulder and smiled like someone who had seen better things and wasn't ashamed to say so. She paid you a full silver penny to mend the slit in her gown, an opening that was meant to be there. She told you to show just enough. She laughed when you blushed. She called herself Alice, though you never knew if that was her real name. She was gone by morning. You still think about her. You never asked what she did to earn that penny. You knew better, but her confidence stayed with you. Not the kind born of arrogance, but the kind that comes when someone stops asking permission to be seen. Since then, you've sewn differently. Not all the time, not openly, but in quiet ways. You fold tiny corners into lining corners, stitched with your name, or with a star, or with thread that shines just barely when it catches firelight. You mend a child's bonnet with golden thread, and say it was all you had. You edge a collar, in a scalloped pattern that no one will notice but you. You sew memory into every seam, and then one day, they bring you the girls. First one, then another. Daughters of women you've known since you were a child. Young, still soft-cheeked, still unsure of how to hold their hands when standing still. They come because their mothers have started saving, piece by piece, for their future. Not dowries that's too costly, but small things. Hope, made tangible. A shift that fits properly. a tunic that flatters, a veil without stains. You measure them carefully. You listen to what they don't say. One says she wants to look clean. Another says she wants sleeves that are harder to grab. You do as they ask. You ask no questions. You start thinking of them as your own, not because they need a mother, but because they need someone who sees them as more than what they'll be traded for. You teach them as you work how to reinforce seams, how to tell flax from hemp, how to spot real wool from the cheap stuff the traders try to pass off. You teach them how to wear a belt low to hide a stomach, how to pad a bodice for shape. You teach them how to make do. They learn quickly. One girl asks, "Why do rich women wear veils so long they drag on the ground?" You answer, "To show they don't need to keep them clean." She nods slowly. Something settles in her face. You wonder what she'll do with that knowledge, and then one day, the steward's wife arrives. She doesn't knock. She stands in the doorway and surveys your work with a face carved from sour milk. She's heard, she says, that you've been sewing things you ought not, that you've been adding trim where it wasn't paid for, that a girl wore a red ribbon to church and said it came from your basket. You apologize. You do not explain. She leaves, but you know she'll be back. That night, you open the wooden chest where you keep your own things. You take out the russet gown. You hold it in your lap. You see how it's faded further, more rust than red now. Still, it glows in the candlelight. You run your hands along the hem. Then you begin to unpick the seams. Carefully, quietly, you dismantle it. You fold the fabric into squares and tuck them into your basket. Over the next week, you use it all. A bit in a bodice lining, a cuff here, a sash there, a patch for a little girl's apron that's always tearing. None of it obvious, nothing loud, but they're all the same. And when your hands are empty and the fabric is gone, you feel no regret, because you've realized something. They can forbid red all they want, but they cannot stop what it means to you. You will keep sewing, you will. Keep hiding beauty where no one looks. And someday, perhaps long after you're gone, someone will look at a hem or a collar or a strip of cloth and wonder where it came from. And they will feel something, not fear, not shame, not pride even, but the sense of a woman who refused to disappear. That will be enough. The seamstresses say the hardest part of old age is not the pain in your hands, the dulling of your eyes, or the stiff knees that click when you walk. It's the sudden vanishing of your body from the world's attention. You spent your whole life making sure it didn't draw the wrong kind of notice. Modest hems, plain sleeves, hair tied tight and tucked under wool, but now that you've reached 60, it's as if you've slipped out of the fabric of the village altogether. You're still there, folding linens, threading needles, brewing nettle tea, for girls too tired from bleeding to lift their heads, but no one asks how you are. You've become background, the one who has always been there, like the smoke from the hearth or the rooster that crows in the dark. Your fingers aren't as quick as they were, but they still know the weight of flax, the slick slide of worsted wool, the scratch of raw hemp. Your eyes catch the fray in a cuff before anyone else sees it. You mend, not for coin now, but because no one else remembers how. You teach the girls when they ask, and a few do, but most are too busy with things you never had time for: love, choice, loudness. You're glad for them. You are. You never married, not because you refused, but because no one asked, and you never pressed. At first, it shamed you, then it freed you. No man ever had a say in your dresses, your sleep, your coin. You watched your friends bend under the weight of expectation, of bearing, of silence. You envied their children, but not their bruises. You wanted softness, yes, but you also wanted space to breathe. You found it at your workbench, not at a man's hearth. Now the young women bring you their hopes in the form of cloth. Can this be let out, if I swell with child? One asks, holding a new bodice. Another whispers, if I wear this to market, will he see me differently? You don't answer those questions directly. You talk about darts and seams and which cuts flatter their arms. You talk about how red isn't just red, that there's blood red, cherry, rust, wine, flame, and each one means something different, depending on who sees it. You still keep scraps. A little pouch tucked deep in your chest, where you once stored the russet dress. Now it's filled with remnants. A triangle of linen dyed from onion skins. A corner of striped green wool. A silk ribbon so narrow it couldn't hem a handkerchief. You run your fingers over them sometimes, as though they are pages in a book only you can read. One morning, a messenger arrives from the abbey. A nun has died. Her sister, now also cloistered, has requested that her burial gown be made by someone who remembers her. That someone is you. You remember the girlie lame quiet, sharp-eyed, always watching her shoes. You remember when her mother brought her to you to hem her best gown before she left for the convent. Make her look simple, the mother said. Humble. You made the stitches nearly invisible, but you lined the inside of the neckline with sky blue thread. The girl never mentioned it, but when she wrote you a letter years later, she signed it, from the one with the blue at her throat. You sit for hours, sewing the burial gown. Plain linen, as ordered. Straight lines, soft sleeves, no embroidery, but you fold the hem just once more than necessary, and tuck a single strand of red thread inside. Not enough to be seen, only enough to be known. As you fold the finished garment, you feel tears rise in your throat, not for grief, but for continuity. You've passed something forward, however small, a reminder, hidden in plain sight. A week later, a girl appears at your door. She is no one you know. Her dress is worn, her cheeks winch. She asks if you are the one who made the red stitches. You do not answer. You don't need to. She holds out a bundle of cloth threadbare wool, a rough apron, a cap with a hole at the crown. Can you teach me? She asks. I want to make something of my own. You nod, and so it begins again. You teach her, as you were never taught, how to bind a neckline so it doesn't rub, how to measure without a yardstick, how to read a person's story in the way their fabric hangs. You tell her that clothes are memory. They record what no one dares say aloud. You tell her how a red ribbon can be defiance, how a single pleat can be mercy, how even the poorest woman can choose where her hem falls. You die one winter morning years later, without pain, without spectacle. You are buried in a gown you made yourself decades earlier, gray wool, lined at the neck with faded russet, nearly invisible unless the light catches it just right. The priest calls you a pious woman, a quiet woman, a help to many. He does not mention the hands you guided, the hidden threads, the young girls who now sew in quiet rooms and remember the lessons you never wrote down. They remember anyway, because cloth doesn't lie. It stretches and stains and fades, but it holds the mark of every hand that shaped it. And you, though never noble, never titled, never painted or sung about, remain there tucked in seams and linings whispered along folds, remembered in hems that dared to hold a bit of color when no one was looking. You were never meant to hold a quill. Not in this world. Not with the hands that churn butter and pluck chickens and rub bruises from children's legs. Writing is not for women like you, not unless it's to sign a marriage contract or copy a prayer under the watchful eye of a parish priest. Letters, words, ideas, they belong to monks, scribes, lords, to men who own land and books and lives. And yet here you are, kneeling in the shadows of the scriptorium, fingers smudged with ink, heart pounding, copying words you were told never to read, let alone write. The first time you touched parchment, it was to clean it. You were 12 and brought into the nun's workroom because you were quiet, and quiet girls were useful. They needed someone to sweep, to boil glue, to scrub the margins of vellum sheets. You said nothing. You watched. And then one evening, Sister Helene fell asleep beside the crucifix, the nib of her pen drying mid-sentence. and you picked it up. It wasn't intentional. Your fingers simply wanted to know what it felt like. You dipped it in ink. You scratched. A single letter, just one, into the lower corner of a scrap parchment. A G for your own name, Ghislaine. It looked strange, too sharp, too permanent. You blew on it gently, as you had seen the sisters do, and it dried like blood. You stared at it for a long time. No one ever saw. That was the beginning. You taught yourself in fragments. A word here, a sentence there, glimpsed over shoulders, or smuggled from waste parchment. The sisters had no idea you were watching, memorizing, mimicking. You learned to sharpen a quill to just the right angle, how to fold a piece of linen to blot the excess ink, how to warm your hands before writing so the lines wouldn't tremble. You practiced in the margins of discarded scraps, careful, never, to waste space. You learned Latin before you knew all your prayers. You copied psalms backward, then forward again, just to understand how the shapes flowed. You traced the curves of illuminated letters when no one was looking. You began to see language as texture, as something you could hold in your hand. By the time you were 16, you could write better than some of the novices. Still, no one knew. You wore your silence like armor. You cleaned and stitched and nodded at the abbess's instructions, all while your mind turned over sentence after sentence. Sometimes, when no one was near, you composed poems under your breath about clouds, about footsteps, about things too small for anyone else to notice. You began writing your own book in secret, not bound, just loose pages tucked under your mattress, hidden between layers of wool. The ink was crude, the parchment was torn, but the words were yours. You wrote of days and seasons, of birth and heat, and the way the world bends around a woman until she forgets her shape. You never wrote your name. You didn't need to. The words themselves were evidence of your defiance. The priory library was locked, of course, but not to you. Not after you learned where the abbess kept her key. You crept in once a week, breath held, hands trembling. You never took a book. You only sat, late into the night, copying phrases onto hidden scraps. Hildegard's visions, Boethius's prison. A phrase from Julian that stayed with you for weeks. All shall be well, and all shall be well. You didn't believe it, but you wrote it anyway. Then came the night you were caught. It wasn't dramatic. Sister Anne found you in the library, with a candle and 3 stolen scraps tucked into your sleeve. She said nothing at first, just stared. You stared back. You expected her to run to the abbess, to scream, to tear the ink from your hands. Instead, she sat beside you. She whispered, "What did you write?" You hesitated. "A poem," you said, "about waiting." She nodded, read it. And so you did. Your voice cracked. Your hands shook. You could barely meet her eyes, but she listened. When you finished, she took your hand. She said only, "Write more." She never told anyone. In fact, she brought you scraps after that trio parchment, not the discarded kind. She smuggled you a quill with a silver nib. Once, she even slipped you a bit of lapis blue pigment, to make the words more beautiful, she said. You cried when you saw it. You began to write, every day. The pages piled slowly, hidden in a cloth satchel you kept beneath the floorboards. You wrote about silence, about the press of obedience, about the way women are expected to give and never be asked. You wrote about hunger, not for food, but for space, for recognition, for air. One afternoon, you heard the priest talking with the abbess. He said too many books were being borrowed, that some of the novices were growing too curious. They don't need to read 2 scrubbed floors, he said. They need discipline. That night, you wrote the angriest poem of your life. You wrote it in thick, dark ink. You did not hide it. You left it on the lectern in the chapel, unsigned. The next morning, the priory was humming. The abbess read it aloud in silence, her lips moving but no sound coming. No one claimed it. No one confessed. and no one dared to punish what could not be proven. The next week, there were new locks on the library. The ink stores were moved to the infirmary. The novices were told to spend more time in prayer. You went back to writing in secret, and still, the words came, not because you wanted them to, but because you couldn't stop them. You began writing letters to women who would never read them: heretics, saints, midwives, queens. You asked questions they were never allowed to answer. You signed them all with the same mark, a single inked G, buried at the bottom corner of the page, just like the first letter you ever wrote. You didn't think your writing would change anything. You weren't foolish. But still, you hoped that one day someone might find your pages and understand something about the world you lived in. That women existed here, not just as wives, or nuns, or daughters, but as thinkers, as watchers, as scribes in shadow. And then one day, years later, a novice found your bundle of writings tugged beneath a loose tile, sealed in wax. She didn't say a word, not even to you, but that night, you saw her fingers stained with ink. You understood, and said nothing. You begin to write in margins, not because you have no room, though parchment is still precious and rare, but because the margins are where women have always lived. Edge spaces, side glances, hidden corners of the world. You learn to press your thoughts between lines of doctrine, to slip your questions beneath hymns, to scrawl your fears in the gutters of sermons that will outlive you. It's not rebellion, not openly. It's a method of survival. The priory still runs, as it always has. The bells ring, the prayers echo, the chores fall into rhythm. Laundry on Mondays, bread on Thursdays, gardens on feast days. But beneath that rhythm, another pattern has emerged. A growing web of women like you, copyists, caretakers, ink slippers, women who ask quietly and listen carefully. You don't lead them. You don't claim anything. You simply write. And because you write, they do too. The girl who found your first bundle, Agnes, barely 15, comes to you now, in the laundry room, under cover of steam and boiling linens. She whispers questions about grammar, then about metaphor. She has a sharp mind. You see it in the way she twists words into shapes even you never thought of. You give her a stub of your old quill and a pouch of soot-black ink. She thanks you without words. That night, you find a tiny poem tucked in the sleeve of your robe. It makes you smile in the dark. More begin to write. Some scratch lines into bark and stone. Others carve initials into wooden spoons or mutter verses under their breath while kneading bread. You recognize your own lines, reshaped in their mouths, saltered, misremembered, improved. It doesn't matter. They're not yours anymore. They belong to the ones who needed them. You begin slipping scraps into books. Not for the sisters, most of them don't read outside the Psalter, but for the ones who might come later. A line tucked behind the exalted. A riddle scrawled beneath a list of saints' names. A verse written backward, hidden in the bottom fold of a ledger. You choose your hiding places carefully, always between what's permitted and what's forgotten. No one notices. Or perhaps no one dares say they've noticed. The priest is replaced. The new one is younger, sharper, more pious. He talks often of sin. He walks with his hands behind his back, scanning rooms as though they might confess themselves. He frowns at the scriptorium. Too many women, he says. Too much writing. He doesn't like that the copies aren't always precise, that the margins hold smudges, fingerprints, things he cannot trace. He orders an audit. The abbess obeys. A visiting monk is sent to review the manuscripts. He's quiet, with a limp and ink on his cuffs. You fear him at first, but soon you realize he is not hunting errors, he is chasing beauty. He touches the pages like they are alive. He hums as he reads. Once, you see him pause on a page where you've hidden a line beneath a drawing of a dove. He lifts the parchment to the light. He smiles. That evening, he asks who copied the text. No one answers. You lower your head and say you assisted. He nods and says, "Good work." Then he leaves. Nothing happens. But you realize how close you've come, so you begin to destroy. Not everything, but some. You burn pages you once couldn't bear to let go. You unpick stitches that held words in their folds. You scrape clean the backs of bindings where you'd etched phrases in shorthand. It hurts, but it's necessary. Your writing isn't safe. Not anymore. Still, you can't stop entirely. You don't know how. You begin to write smaller, faster, on slivers of cloth, on bits of bone, on wax tablets that can be wiped away. You compose entire verses in your head while weeding the garden, repeating them until they're memorized, then shared. You write less for permanence now, more for movement. A poem passed hand to hand survives longer than one locked in a chest. Agnes takes up the work after you fall ill. Your body begins to fail in ways that ink cannot fix. Your joints lock. Your breath comes short. Your fingers lose their steadiness. You train her carefully. How to blend pigment. How to dry scraped parchment without curling the edges. How to let meaning linger without making it obvious. She asks questions you never would have dared, and you are glad for that. You tell her not to sign her name. Not yet. You watch as she teaches others. The work spreads like roots under soil, unseen, but strong. One day, you find a phrase you didn't write, carved delicately into the underside of a prayer stool. It reads, "We are here. We always were." You trace it with your finger and feel a strange joy. You are no longer the only whisper in the dark. As your strength fades, the abbess begins visiting more often. She doesn't ask about your papers. She brings honeyed water and a psalter bound in red leather. She reads aloud while you listen, eyes closed. One day, she asks gently, "Did you ever regret not being silent?" You consider, then shake your head. "Silence was never an option," you whisper. "Only concealment." She smiles faintly. "Then you've done more than most." Your final days are quiet. The sisters bring broth. Agnes sits beside you with ink-stained hands and speaks softly about the new girl she's teaching. You smile. You ask her to read one of her poems. She does. It's about fire. About how something can burn and still leave warmth behind. When you die, your body is wrapped in linen. Your name is added to the record of those who served the priory faithfully. Your years are marked. Your chores are noted. Nothing else. But behind the chapel, beneath the stone ledge, there is a bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. Inside are 27 pages you're writing, Agnes's others. Unnamed, unsigned, unclaimed. And yet, every line burns with a single truth. Someone was here. Someone saw. Someone wrote. The ink will fade, but the meaning won't. The bundle stays hidden beneath the chapel ledge for years, then decades. Sometimes someone moves the stone, by accident or curiosity, and finds nothing more than a waxed cloth bundle, brittle with age and stained by damp. Many look at it, unfold a page or two, skim the words, and frown. The Latin is not elegant. The script is uneven. There are smudges, crossed out lines, annotations made in different hands. To some, it looks like nothing more than a collection of amateur scribbles. But a few pause longer. They read more carefully, and then, almost always, they place the pages back and restore the stone without a word. They understand something instinctive, that these words were not written for approval, or for permanence, or for praise. They were written to survive. Agnes becomes abbess after many years. She never claims the bundle. She never mentions your name aloud. But under her rule, the priory changes. The scriptorium is opened again, not just for copying, but for learning. Novices are taught their letters alongside their prayers. They write in the margins. They scribble notes beside saints' lives. They argue with old texts and praise new ones. They begin to ask what it means when the only stories left are those told by men. You are never named in the records. Your birth date is not carved anywhere. No portrait is painted. No stained glass window colored with your face. But in the silence between chants, in the rustling of parchment, in the candlelit hours when one girl reads to another from a borrowed scroll, your voice lingers, not as a ghost, but as a guide, as the breath behind the words. Over time, your writing spreads. Someone copies a line into the flyleaf of a hymnal. Another girl repeats a stanza aloud during prayer. A nun tucks a folded verse into her traveling sack before she is sent to another house. A child, grown from one of the village girls you once mended tunics for, finds a fragment of your writing sewn into the hem of her mother's shawl. She doesn't know whose words they are, but they make her pause. Years later, a scholar cataloging manuscripts in a dusty ecclesiastical archive finds a sheet of parchment in a drawer where it doesn't belong. There's no attribution, no seal, nothing to link it to a known scribe. Just a short poem written in a hand that shifts halfway through. It reads like a prayer, but doesn't address God. It speaks of heat and hunger, and a voice pressed down. So long it forgot how to sing. The scholar notes it, transcribes it, and forgets it. But someone else reads it, and remembers. The truth is, women like you rarely get to see the impact of what you make. You write without guarantee, without certainty, without safety. You work in the margins, not just of books, but of history. You scratch meaning into spaces, never meant to hold you, and yet you persist. Your bundle survives to floods, a fire, and the gradual rot of stone and wood. Some pages crumble, others are carried off, reused to patch a boot or line a chest, but a few remain, long enough to be read again, to be copied again, to inspire again, not because they are perfect, but because they are yours, and because you wrote not to be remembered, but because you refused to be silent. The women who come after you never know your name, not for certain, but they speak of the first ones who wrote when they weren't allowed to, who questioned what was handed down, who dared to say, I think, and I feel, and I saw. You are among them. Your words are never canonized. They are never read from a pulpit, but they endure in the way a story passed hand to hand survives long after kingdoms fall. They endure in the tremble of a quill held by a girl who has just written her first word and realizes she will never be the same again. She does not know you, but she is you.